Tonight is about flying reindeer and other mushroom lore. And boy, am I excited to share what all of these myths and stories have to do with mushrooms. And I want to know if any of you had any idea. Please um, use the chat box to interact with me. Um, did you have any idea that mushrooms were intertwined with our holiday traditions? Elizabeth says yes. People say no. Not until I told them. Yes, Sarah, you are in the right track. The pagans. I don't know how to say that. But yeah, the holiday traditions that Christianity has adopted date for things that are much older. And yes, there are mushrooms in the tree. I have our star for tonight, a model for our star of tonight in my virtual background. Carol, don't give it up. But yes, so we have one mushroom that has been really the star of many, many tales, and that is Amanita muscaria, or the fly agaric in English. This mushroom is poisonous and can create really difficult times when consumed raw, um, but it's also reported to be psychoactive. So the poisonous toxins in this mushroom that is not lethal then are neutralized when dried correctly. It is believed that shamans long time ago developed a tolerance to this mushroom through their journey in shamanism, to be able to tolerate it. It is a mushroom that has dominated the the narrative in many cultures from Europe, Asia, Siberia, and United States as well. It is believed, although the mushroom originates in the old world during the Pleistocene, which is about 2 million years to 100, I'm sorry, 11 11,700 years ago. And that's the period of time that has the most recent repeated glaciations. Is during this time that Amanita muscaria migrates into the New World territory, and its use enters Alaska first, or that Arctic circle, and then spreads throughout North America and eventually south to Mesoamerica. One thing that if you've never taken a class with me, you would be very surprised to know that the mushrooms that we see, the umbrella like mushrooms and other forms as well, are just the fruiting bodies. That means that they are like apples to the tree. What we're seeing is just the fruit that carries the spores that will be dispersed in the air and will generate new mushrooms, just like the seeds in a plant. But the entire body of the fungus is going to be either underground or inside the wood of a tree, or whatever the mushroom that you're observing is. If you're observing a mushroom on top of the soil, then the body It's underground, like a really deep network that is connecting trees and plants. And that, my friends, is in my previous presentation, the Wood Wide Web. I will talk at the end on how to access those previous presentations. Um, if the mushroom that you're seeing is growing on top of a tree, in the stem, in a branch, then what you're seeing is the fruit, and the fruiting body would be growing through the wood, in between those cells, expanding through the tree. If it's growing on an animal like an ant, the mushroom would be at the neck, but the body, it's growing through the body of the ant, consuming it from inside out. So that is to say that most of the time, mushrooms are there in the environment and they can be everywhere. But what we're seeing, which is the fruiting body, it's very has a very ephemeral nature. Would be here for a week at the most, and then we will have to wait until next year or 2 years to see it again. So it's really remarkable. And it speaks to the amount of time that Amanita muscaria has been in existence, on how much this mushroom has been able to colonize human tales, and how many cultures have been affected by this one single species. And yes, my friends, when we look at the research and the genetic analysis the of Amanita muscaria today, we see that the species in Europe is able to mate with those same with those individuals that belong in North America. So technically, they do belong to the same species, although we can see that there are some mutations between each one of the regions in the world. And there is a very interesting um, morphology character, or a very interesting way that the North American Amanita muscaria looks compared to the European one. And it's to say that the scales or warts, which are these spots in on top of the cap, tend to be yellow when the mushroom first emerges, but as soon as they get exposed to the sunlight, they turn their characteristic white. So during this talk, we are going to see very many aspects in which Amanita muscaria has influenced our stories and our culture. And I wanted to share this beautiful clip um, in the Disney movie Fantasia. Awesome. So you can see here that even in Disney is beginning to have that influence in the creativity and in the imagination. It's a mushroom that has stimulated the imagination of many people before us. Um, Interesting on that clip is to see that if you paid attention, there are younger mushrooms that are not particularly red, but yellow and orange. And if you look up the description for Amanita muscaria, it can have varieties that are on the yellow orange range in color, which is very appropriate in my very personal opinion. Now, if we will look at Alice in Wonderland, hello, Alice was stripping. So, if you look at Alice in Wonderland, there is this girl that, or young lady, that is biting into a mushroom to become big or to become small. And this could be a reference to the psychoactive nature of Amanita muscaria. In particular, this mushroom has two psychoactive compounds, which are ibotenic acid and mucimol, and most of them are contained in the cap of the mushroom. So notice that when Alice in Wonderland is biting the mushroom, it's not biting the stem, it's biting the very top of the cap. Another signal that it might be Amanita muscaria, what she was eating. So these compounds are active because they mimic the neurotransmitters in the brain that and that gives a feeling of intoxication. So in this intoxication includes feeling a little bit nauseous, a little bit drowsy, sweaty, and the person is going to experience hallucinations. So many of the cultures in the world, many of the prehistoric cultures have used this mushroom as a religious and spiritual experience because it supposedly it stimulates this sense of connecting with a world that is outside of yourself, kind of a higher dimension, if you will. It also diminishes the response to fear stimulus, but these symptoms are going to vary depending on the body chemistry of the person who is um, taking them, and also the mental state. One of the things that I have heard most about hallucinogenic mushrooms is the fact that the mental state in which you go into that experience alters very much or influences very much what type of experience you are going to observe. Now, I have to put a disclaimer here in red, bold letters because nor myself or ANS are advocating the consumption of any mushrooms or the consumption of psychedelic mushrooms. I also want to remind the audience that in many states, eh, these are considered drugs and are illegal. So, there it is. I have not, being a mycologist, and I have not tasted or tried these mushrooms, which I get a lot of flag for, but I don't care. So here it is. I'm just presenting the facts that these mushrooms have been in different cultures all around the world, not necessarily advocating their use. Um, I I also want to remind you that in this presentation is going to be sent to you, both the recording and the slides. And in the slides, you're going to see the links where many of the information pieces that I put together, you can read more and learn more about it. So I've been talking about Amanita muscaria being used as a spiritual experience. So part of that is how what Amanita muscaria looks like, and it's a red mushroom with white warts. Um, and a if you look at how shamans used to dress, it's very much replicating how Amanita muscaria looks. Here in the bottom right, you are seeing a male shaman and a shamaness or a female shaman, both representing that red clothing characteristic of the mushroom. And when you examine the ritual or the beliefs in Christmas, you have a bag of goodies, you have reindeers that are flying, you have ornaments in the trees, Santa's outfit, the stockings by the fire. All of that, my friends, believe it or not, it's related to this one mushroom. How can mushrooms be so powerful in our culture? So, in the winter solstice, Koryak shaman, which is a Siberian shaman, a Siberian tribe, will gather several hallucinogenic mushrooms, again Amanita muscaria, and launch himself into a spiritual journey to the tree of life, which happened to be a pine tree. See a connection here? And that tree of life lived by the North Star, held the answers to all the village problems to the previous year. So this shaman was consuming Amanita muscaria to open his mind to access that other dimension, that higher power, and get the answers that will serve to guide the tribe for the next year. And all of this happened during the winter solstice or the Saturnalia festivities. Um, so this goes back way back. Um, Amanita muscaria has been documented as far back as 9,000 BC in anthropological studies in North African and indigenous cultures. Um, Around the 3,000 to 3,500 years before Christ's mark, then we start observing the mushrooms being documented in cave paintings. So in the higher left, you're observing cave the Pascuala cave in Spain, that has this picture of mushrooms with an aura around them, that indicates a really prominent place in the culture. The Spain cave depictions of mushrooms go back 6 to 8,000 years, among other ancient depictions around Europe, so very, very far back. But when we look at recent molecular studies, they propose that the Amanita muscaria has ancestral origins in the Siberian Beringian region during the Tertiary period, 65 million years ago. And that happens, that is when scientists are proposing that the species originated. So we're talking about these species being evolved um, as far back as 65 million years ago, and then it is spread through all Asia, Europe, and North America. So at the top are the paintings in the cave in Spain, but at the bottom we see the older paintings in the cave in Tassili, Algeria. In this particular one, and I love it because you see this shaman with what we believe are the folkloric dressing and the costume. And that costume is full of mushrooms. So, what you're seeing at the middle, whoops, what you're seeing in the middle and lower left are pictures of the actual cave, pictures of the cave walls. So you see a lot of mushroom imagery between these humanoid forms holding mushrooms, but also having caps by their heads. And then this lower right, it's a redraw of the cave painting right here. So you can see a little bit better how all the costume is it's entangled with mushrooms. And if you want to learn more about that, I have the links here where you can see more information about these very first notions that we have of Amanita muscaria in culture. So when you first start doing research about um, how the tree tradition comes, it says, history.com says that the tradition is started in Germany around the year 1600. But honestly, we know better than that. The Celtics and the Vikings start are really the first cultures that I could find that are using this tree of life imagery to decorate their spaces, the temples, and they're decorating it with pine tree boughs. However, Romans also celebrate Saturnalia in the winter solstice, so about December 21st or 22nd. And like the Celtics are also decorating the temples with evergreens. Now, we know that these cultures used Amanita muscaria in as part of their daily life and as part of their spiritual preparations. So we know that these mushrooms are either placed in a sock and placed next to the fire to dry them out, or the shaman will put them hanging from pine trees so the cold air will dry them out and they could be consumed without having those poisonous toxins assigned to the psychoactive experience. And I have been talking for way too long. So Let me know in the chat box if you have any questions. Going once, going twice. Let's go. All right. So if there are no questions, oh, did the Native Americans bring them to North America? So the the Amanita muscaria is also it's also used in North American culture. So as humans migrate during that Pleistocene period, where there it's believed that both continents were connected, and that facilitated human migration. Amanita muscaria came with that human migration, and it also uh, starts to colonize North American territory, starting with the Arctic Circle and migrating down. And yes, we see them used also by Native American shamans. Explain drying them makes them less dangerous. So there are a lot of plants and fungi that have these toxins that either through fire or through um, either through fire or through extracting the water, then you're going to change the chemical composition of of, of some of the compounds in the object, and that will destroy their capability of being poisonous. So Amanita muscaria is one of them. The drying process is going to inactivate the the poisonous compound, and then it's no longer harmful for the human body. Um, could I show the slide of the tree of life? Believe it's in, I believe I'm on it, right? Do some groups use these mushrooms for medical uses other than shamanism? So, not Amanita muscaria. There are other mushrooms such as reishi that has been used by Chinese culture for thousands of years. Sorry, turkey tail. It's also used. So there are many medicinal mushrooms, but every species of mushroom has a different secondary metabolite compound that are associated with it. So Amanita muscaria is not one of those that has been used for medicinal. Although you could argue that it might have medicinal properties. We just don't, um, we haven't explored them. And making it, because it is a hallucinogenic, it's really difficult to have the research studies that will um, that will corroborate that information because they are illegal. So it makes it hard for scientists to do research on those type of mushrooms. The biggest example of this that I could give you are the liberty caps, also known as psilocybe mushrooms. And these do have very potent medicinal properties that were beginning to be explored. And then the research had to be shut down because they were paired or they were associated with the same um, effects as LSD. So they were categorized just as LSD, and it was illegal. Uh, Great. I'm very happy to hear that, Carol. Does the John Hopkins study use Amanita muscaria or any other mushrooms? So yes, the John Hopkins studies were using the Liberty caps as because they have the highest hallucinogenic potency in them. The compound is different though. Amanita muscaria has a muscario. I just said them. It's in the hold on. So the compounds in Amanita muscaria are ibotenic acid and mucimol, but the compounds in psilocybe mushroom are psilocybin. So it's a different compound, and it's even more potent. And yes, the John Hopkins study is one of those that was studying it with very much detail, and had even there is a documentary that explains all this process that I'm going to look up and send you in an email, so you can learn more about how these mushrooms became to be studied first and then criminalized, stunting the research on them. Ba-da-ba-ba. The slide with the shaman. Right here. This one, Stella?
No, the one with the cute guy with the cap.
Okay, that one. So what do we wanna see in here?
Uh, I was just so interested in the connection with Santa Serenella.
Yeah. And to give you a little bit more about that connection to Santa, so the shaman will be carrying this bag of mushrooms in his back. I forgot to say that, so thank you, Stella. So my husband is laughing right next to me. So the shaman is carrying a bag of mushrooms, and because we are in the Arctic Circle, what what ends up happening is that the people were snowed in. So the shaman will drop the gifts or the mushrooms through the chimney for the people in the houses. And I have a video at the end, showing this particular link. So yes, Santa was a shaman. So, and speaking with ornaments, I don't know if many of you remember Dr. Matt Carson from West Virginia University. He is the one that had running the 8-year-old Twinkie project, and he presented the zombie apocalypse talk on eh, entomopathogenic fungi, or fungi that attacks and makes zombies out of insects. So he has another project going on that I hope that all of you can contribute to. His latest project is nature's ornaments, because he has observed that when we bring these natural trees into our houses, sometimes we get our unexpected ornaments in the tree as well. So, whether it is insects or fungi that are attacking the tree, there might be something interesting for you to share. So take a really close look of your tree. And if you find any of nature's ornaments, please send it to him. You can send it to him via Twitter, either to Dr. Carson or to Dr. Lovett. They are both collaborating in the same research lab. Um, so you can also be part of this fantastic new project. Yes, Peter, if you've seen the moths, please take a shot of the moth and share it in Twitter. If you don't have Twitter, but you want to contribute, you could also send it in an email to me and I will post it on your behalf. So, there are also many other myths that are related to mushrooms that don't necessarily need to deal with Christmas per se. So we have this mischievous supernatural fairy in the English folklore who is Puck the Fairy. And it's a character during one of Shakespeare's plays, A Midsummer Dream. This very old but beautiful painting made by Richard Dad from the 1800s shows this fairy sitting on a mushroom, which indicates that association of fairies with supernatural phenomena. Um, so I have a little video of that. Hold on. Mm.
I know a bank where the wild thyme blows.
Look at the
With the
mycelium.
juice of this, I'll streak her eyes and make her full of hateful fantasies.
I pray thee, gentle mortal, I love thee. What visions have I seen? Methought I was enamored of an ass.
Your lies were not.
Lord, what food this mortal be?
So I'm always, um, and I'll share this with you. But I am always fascinated by that connection between nature and the magical, and I think it's such a stimulating a, a stimulating brain process to let your mind wander and find that magical moment in nature. And I think that I love mushrooms so much because it does present that link between the science and the magic and the myths that allows your brain to go a little bit farther and your creativity to just wander and go wild. And I am certain that I'm not alone because otherwise I wouldn't be able to find so many linkages that other people have done, whether creative processes, and they have produced art and plays and all sorts of all sorts of art to express that connection of nature and the unknown. So speaking about fairies is not just Puck. It's also these fairy rings. So here's another phenomena that stimulates that creativity. And if you've ever paid attention to a field where there are mushrooms in a ring, you know that people are left wonder what is that. So the legend tells us that fairy rings are formed in areas where fairies dance. However, that is in modern times. Other cultures also thought that this was where the devil placed their baculum, and when the devil pick up the staff, then the fairy ring sprouted. Um, but in more modern times, it's related to fairy gathering places. Um, Shakespeare interpret, if I could only talk, in Shakespeare times, people believed that sheep will not graze in the center of the fairy because it was a place for the paranormal. And people would say that if you dance in the center of a fairy ring, you would be left there forever and unable to leave. In Germany, they are also called hexen rings and ascribed to dancing of witches. The reality, though, it's much less fantastic than that, but very, very exciting. Do sheep graze in the rings? I don't know. I really don't know. I will have to go follow some sheep to see if they like it or not. But certainly, what we are seeing is the margin or the edge of the mushroom growth. So I'm sorry, the fungal growth. And remember, the what we're seeing is just the fruits that are at the edge of the body, and that body is called mycelium. Um, the mycelium exhibits radial growth. So, right at the center of this ring, there must have been some spores that colonized that area and started spreading. So, here on the lower right, you see how the mycelium would be growing under optimal conditions. Now, this is a very homogeneous place where most of the soil that is in that area it's going to be um, fairly homogeneous, fairly similar. You are going to see partial mushroom rings, or you are going to see maybe not see them at all, but just a little line in places where the soil has changed. So maybe there's a patch of soil right here that allows that radial growth to continue very homogeneous, but there might be a pocket right in this area that does not allow the growth of the mycelium at the same rate as the other side. There might be rocks in there. There might be more inorganic content than the organic content on the other side. And the other reason that we might not see the fairy rings is because they're so large that we cannot see them where we are standing. It's the same phenomena as the horizon. We see the horizon as a flat line because the circumference of the earth it's so vast relative to us. I'm not saying the mushroom is as large as the earth is wide, but it explains a little bit of the phenomena. So much so that the largest fungus in the world, I'm going to tell you, and I'm so proud about this, the largest organism in the world is not a sequoia, is not a blue whale, but is actually a fungus. And that fungus was observed in the Malheur National Forest in Oregon. Let me go next. So there, little bit, little bit of misplacement. But this is the largest fungus in the world, where it is Armillaria ostogiae. It was found by helicopter in the Malheur National Forest in Oregon. The diameter of that is 3.4 square miles. The area of that is 3.4 square miles. It's estimated that the fungus weighs about 7,500 tons, so a lot. And it has been growing for more than 2,000 years. How did they find these fungus? Because the United States Forest Service was doing helicopter surveys of the of the forest, and they found these rings of dying trees that were expanding every year. So when they send boots to the ground, they find that all around that perimeter there were these mushrooms, just as you see on the left, that are growing right next to the dying trees. When they do molecular analysis of these mushrooms, they find out that they all belong to the same individual. So that is pretty remarkable. And mushroom and magic has also dominated the minds of scientists, so much so that that magical phenomena, it's prevalent in the naming of the mushrooms. So if you see, here are two species that you can find in the state of Maryland and actually in the DMV region. They're fairly common spring through fall. The one on the left, it's called Artomyces pyxidatus, or crowned tipped coral. And crowned for who? Well, my friend, is crowned for the pixies or the fairies. And to the right, you have a lichen that is called Cladonia pyxidata, or the pixie cup lichen. And this is actually a symbiotic organism, meaning that there is a fungus that is living with an algae or a cyanobacteria and a yeast in a community. And these cannot be separated. They have to live together, and they constitute one single species. So even in Lithuanian folklore, we find that mushrooms are linked to their culture. And in this particular occasion, mushrooms end up being the fingers of Velnias, which is a deity, and he is reaching out from the underworld to feed the poor. So, although Velnias is the god of the underworld, he was also associated with trade, hunting, and agriculture. But he is really believed to be the guardian of the dead. So there's a little bit of linking what the ecological role of many of these species are with the cultural relevance that they are given. And as many of you know, uh, mushrooms are those very critical decomposers of the ecosystem. It is the fungi that have the capability of breaking up the cell wall of plants, which is mainly composed of cellulose. So, being decomposers, it is natural that people will associate them with death and decomposition and rot. So if you look at some historical writings, you have Percy Shelley in The Sensitive Plant in around 1820, and he writes that agarics and fungi with mildew and mold started like a mist from the wet ground cold, pale and fleshy as if the decayed dead with a spirit of growth had been animated. Arthur Conan Doyle, around 1900s, then describes fungi as if the fields were spotted with monstrous fungi of size and color never matched before, scarlet and mauve and liver and black. It was as if the sick earth has burst into pustules. Now, if you, first of all, that is so rude. How dare you talk about my friends like that? But if you look at the picture on the right, you are seeing the puffballs. This particular species is the common stump puffball. And you can sort of understand how that could be observed as a pustule. Now, we also have the dead man's fingers, another species that you can find in the DMV region. And it is found on dead trees, and it looks like there's a cadaver just springing out of the wood. So, this helps to perpetuate the notion that some of the fungi can be quite malevolent. Um, but they're not. They're just fulfilling a very important function in the ecosystem. Because if they weren't there decomposing cellulose, we would be swimming in dead plants. There's also the last fungal fear that I want to share with you, um, and this is the deadly amanitas. These are mushrooms that are truly poisonous and can be deadly if consumed. They typically are white or whitish, so you see the mushroom here in the center has a pale yellow cap, but they always have that ring in the middle of the stem. Whoops. They always have that ring in the middle of the stem, that sac at the bottom that may or may not be visible. So it's important that you put a knife right next to the fungus and then lift up to see the base of that stem and to be able to see that vulva. Um, so if you see a mushroom that is white, has a ring, and has a vulva that is poisonous, do not eat. And we are almost there to the end. And the reason why you came tonight. So, what do flying reindeer have to do with mushrooms? Well, it turns out that reindeer and foxes, by the way, love to eat Amanita muscaria. They might also experience that euphoria and hallucinogenic nature. I have read that there might be jumping overly excited into the air, which will give it that sensation of oh my God, this reindeer is flying. But also, it helps that if the reindeer is eating Amanita muscaria and the shaman is in a trip, I can see how they can be perceived as flying in the air. So, reindeer eating the mushrooms or the yellow patches of snow left by other reindeer or the shaman can frolic, skip around in the snow, and have this experience that makes them sing as they're flying in the air. And I have this beautiful um, video to share with you. I thought it was very appropriate to close the night.
So, it's the holidays, and I'm thinking about mushrooms. Psychedelic mushrooms. The Amanita muscaria, to be exact. Most commonly associated with fairies, gnomes, Alice in Wonderland, and Mario. So, what does this magical mushroom have to do with Christmas?
It's surprising that it's taken so long for the popular imagination to encompass who Santa Claus is.
That's Carl Ruck, a scholar known for his work on the influential role hallucinogenic plants have played in mythology and religion. And he believes this mushroom may be one of the reasons we have flying reindeer and an all-knowing man who flies around the globe every winter. Maybe there's another story worth telling this season. One about a psychedelic mushroom-eating shaman from the Arctic.
At least part of the Santa Claus image comes from Lapland.
And that's Lawrence Millman, writer and mycologist. He says the indigenous people of Lapland, known as the Sami, allegedly performed healing rituals led by shamans who used the hallucinogenic mushroom, the Amanita muscaria. So imagine it's winter, we're near the North Pole, and a shaman is coming to your house.
Long ago, the Sami people believed that the shaman who ate an Amanita muscaria ended up looking like an Amanita muscaria. And he came on a reindeer-drawn sled.
So he had reindeer, and he's looking like
a big fat person with red splotches in the dead of winter.
And instead of entering through the snow-blocked doorway, the shaman would drop down the chimney.
What they brought were not physical gifts, but usually healing and problem solving, which would be a kind of gift. And they were rewarded with lots of food.
Offerings of food? Kind of like milk and cookies? Delicious.
And reindeer have a great love for mushrooms, and especially the males like Amanita muscaria. And one of the effects, I don't know if you've had Amanita muscaria, have you?
No, I haven't.
Not that I'm recommending it, mind you. One of the effects makes you feel like you're flying. And one can imagine that that's how reindeer feel as well.
So if we're imagining ourselves in the tent right now, there's a fire going, the shaman is in front of us, and the shaman
would eat the mushroom, go into a trance. Although they would be sitting there beating the drum in the tent, they would be saying, and I'm going down to the underworld and I'm getting advice from so-and-so.
So they would get advice from another realm and bring it back to the people, and
that would be the gift, as it were, of Santa Claus, i.e. the person who took the mushroom and ended up looking like the mushroom. This all becomes a kind of melange. You can't really interpret it with scientific objectiveness.
I should mention, the Amanita muscaria is a highly toxic mushroom, but the urine from reindeer or someone who has consumed it is still highly psychoactive, but without all the toxins. In Siberia, people actually used to drink their shaman's urine to get the effects of the mushroom.
The shaman would eat the muscaria, then he'd urinate, and then his followers would get the urine and drink it. And then they would urinate, and their reindeer would follow them around, wanting to drink their urine.
So I'm not suggesting we start drinking Santa's urine. But what we've got here is a shaman from Lapland, which is near the North Pole, who rides a reindeer-drawn sled, enters people's houses through their chimney, eats red and white mushrooms, goes on a trip, and brings back gifts. And the reindeer love this same mushroom, which gives the sensation of flying. Maybe it's time we recognize that our all-knowing Santa, who travels the globe defying space and time, is actually a shaman. Lawrence, how much do you love Christmas?
I hate Christmas.
Well, what if we embraced this more shamanistic side of Santa? What would that look like?
What I would take away from it, the shaman comes as a healer or to give advice. We should think in terms of regarding Christmas not as a capitalistic holiday, but a time when one should think more spiritually about life, about one's ills, be they psychological or physical.
And you, Carl?
I mean, I think if you don't know the richness of our folkloric tradition, you are missing a large part of the opportunity you have to know who we are as a culture. And we should know what's going on with Santa Claus. It makes it more fun.
Maybe this Christmas we can make room for one more story. One about mushrooms, shamans, and ancient rituals. Maybe we should be asking Santa for something different this year. Something more in the tradition of the shaman forefathers, like time for reflection and looking inward.
This is the Alnita Muscari, like the nose on Rudolph.
So thank you for being here. Thank you for continuing to support us and just for sharing this mushroom fun journey with me tonight. I want to give you a couple of minutes to continue to interact with me if you choose to. You can either continue to use the chat or unmute yourselves and interact with your voice. Thank you very much.
Serenella, there were a few questions that popped up after the ring slides, including, do sheep graze in the rings, and why do we see partial mushroom rings?
Yeah, that I answered those during the talk. So do sheep graze in the ring? I don't know. And why do we see partial rings? Is because either they're too big or the soil doesn't have a homogeneous nature, and part of the ring is not able to grow as the rest of the ring. Oh, wait, and I wanted to also remind you of the talks. Remember, in January 5th, we're going to talk about bats with Shannon Peterson. January 7th, it's going to be about Maryland ambassadors of the Wild Kingdom. And January 12th, it's going to be Reflections of a River Keeper. And that is going to be hosted by my wonderful colleague, Bradley Simpson. I see Catherine with a Muscaria hat. Awesome. Love it. I need one of those. Kristen, can you please remove my spotlight so we can see everybody?
And the hat came from IKEA in the toys section a while ago.
Oh my God.
An excellent
I gotta
hat.
go looking, yeah.
Europeans, right?
Yeah, it's European.
Very cute. Serenella, this is Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
That was fantastic. I wanted to say that a couple years ago, we were riding on a train called Pacific Flyer at night in the night car that has like glass windows. We were going up to Crater Lake, Oregon, and a young man was telling the story of Santa as a shaman drinking the urine and then sharing it with his villagers. And the whole story, like you just told or you just played for us. And that was the first time I ever heard it. And it was so fascinating to hear a young person relating how all these things fit together. And it was at night under the stars in a star car on the train. It was cool. I just wanted to share that because tonight's presentation was once again another cool presentation of the story and how it all fits together. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm so happy that you enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you, Beth and Gail. Thank you, Gail. Happy
You're
to
welcome.
see you.
This was a real treat. Thank you. Thank you, Serenella.
Thank you. I'm very happy that you guys are here and that I can share a little bit of my shenanigans with you. Wonderful. Okay, so thanks everyone. I hope that you find a little time for reflection to be with your loved ones in a safe environment. And I'll see you all next year. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Great job.
Yeah.